Okay, well today's topic, team building and engagement. So by the end of our program, all the participants here today should be able to identify methods of communication that help to build an effective team. They should be able to list team building exercises to help strengthen board and membership relationships. They'll be able to list networking tips that will help them engage with their new members. And they'll be able to identify ways to show appreciation for volunteers as well as members. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, I know some of you might recall this. We've discussed this before a couple of times, but I do think it's really important that we understand it and then review it, and even as a reminder. You know, when it comes to communication, we want to be sure that we're always being as clear and concise as possible, but the 7 C's goes into some really good pointers for communication. So when we're speaking with others, a really great way to ensure that we're communicating in a manner that the recipient's going to understand our message is just by writing down a simple checklist, which we call the 7 C's, as you see here. And it's made of 7 simple steps to communicate effectively. First, we want to be clear. Know what the exact purpose of our message is, what the goal is in communicating with the person. We want to try to minimize and simplify our message as well. When speaking directly to the person, we don't want to beat around the bush. You know, especially when it comes to email, sometimes our email can be perhaps a little bit more lengthy than they should. So especially when written communication is concerned, we do want to be as clear and direct as we can. Be concise, stick to the point, and keep it short. So kind of the same thing. Try to avoid unnecessary filler words like just, actually, or definitely. And I'll be the first to admit that I do use a couple of these words on occasion, or maybe more than on occasion. It is something I've become more conscious of, and I am trying to correct it. But again, as you're keeping these 7 steps in mind, maybe think of those specifically. If you stay on point, we won't be as likely to repeat ourselves, or most of the time we don't need to elaborate any further. Be concrete. Back up your communication with details or facts. You know, if you're asking somebody to do something or telling them what needs to be done, maybe giving them examples of why it needs to be done, or even how it needs to be done for that matter. But at the same time, we want to be sure that we're sticking to the subject at hand. Be correct. We want to be sure whatever it is we're communicating that it's truthful and we can speak knowledgeably about the topic. When writing especially, we want to be sure our messages are error-free. So really take the time to double-check your work and proofread it. You know, even just your everyday email, certainly worth the time to proofread it. Make sure that your grammar is correct and that there are no spelling errors. However, most of us write through email, and we have the luxury of having spell check. So that's not always something that we have to watch for. But again, when it comes to grammar, that's something we really want to be conscious of. Be coherent. Our communications should be logical, have a natural flow, and consistent tone to them. Be complete. We want to be sure we are including all the information necessary for the recipient to fully understand or take action. So we don't want to miss any information. You know, the more information we give them, as long as we're staying on point, the better off they are. And be courteous. Good communication doesn't have to be like giving orders. While we certainly want to be firm, we can be clear about our message. We need to be conscious of our tone and keep our communication friendly and open. This really, when we use that kind of tone and we're courteous, it really makes us more approachable as leaders and not nearly as intimidating. And just another step, it's not listed here, it's really not technically part of the 7 C's communication list, but I do feel it is important to be consistent, especially when it comes to member communications. Being consistent and in constant communication with one another will help keep plans on track, and of course it ensures that nothing's going to slip through the crack, especially when we're speaking of communication as a board. So each of these guidelines, they can be applied to any type of communication, again, whether it's face-to-face, email, or over the phone. Just a very simple checklist to keep in mind as you're communicating with one another. In addition to 7 C's, keeping that in mind, of course, much of our understanding of one another comes from who we are as individuals. As leaders, we should all be evaluating our own individual skills, such as contributing ideas and solutions. We want to share suggestions, ideas, and solutions and proposals with our other board members or members. This is another important communication skill that we are able to share. We're not just having a one-sided conversation. The ability and the willingness to share increase when levels of trust are high. So this is another way we can build trust with one another on our boards or among our members. And of course, reporting on individual and team progress is another way to contribute to team success. Respecting and valuing. All forms of communication are enhanced within a team when the members respect and they value each other. And this is regardless of our strengths or weaknesses, and even how we view one another. Team communication is often strengthened when members encourage and they support each other's ideas and efforts. But some of us might want to keep in mind if there's any cultural or background differences and be sure that we're respectful of those differences. You know, some of us may come from a culture where their personal space is a little bit of a shorter distance than others. So those are the kinds of things to keep in mind and just have respect for one another in those cases. We want to question and clarify. Is there an uncertainty about something being said? It's important to ask for more information to clear it up before any confusion before moving on. So make sure that you really understand what somebody is trying to say. You could ask probing questions. They don't need to be offensive. They could be another way to do this is paraphrasing points that have been made. So just restating it in different words, maybe words that you understand better. These are other effective ways to ensure that a deeper understanding and clear, accurate communication is among your board. Persuading and defending. These are some other individual skills that we can work on. The power of positive communication is evident when members exchange, defend, and even rethink ideas. When we're presenting points of view and the reasons for them, it often improves the decision-making process. You know, it doesn't have to be a heated debate. It doesn't have to be he said, she said. You know, we're all professionals. We're all adults. So there is a way to defend and exchange those kind of ideas, especially when it comes to a hot topic. And sometimes, you know, compromising is necessary, and it helps to avoid the team, you know, moving along or avoiding not being able to move along and progress. So compromise is not always the worst thing. And of course, helping and caring about one another, seeking and giving assistance. It really strengthens team cohesiveness. Asking for help should be viewed as a valuable skill that's necessary for the advancement of the overall team goal. Often successful teams have members that freely seek help and they're willingly offer help to others. So it goes both ways. Healing and caring contribute to a very positive, cooperative, and collaborative overall relationship among your board, among your personal lives, really, as well as your relationships that you have with your members. And then perhaps one of the most important individual skills is listening, and not just listening, but listening actively, which involves looking directly at the person who is speaking, of course, taking again into cultural appropriateness, focusing intently on what is being said, you know, your body language, if you're nodding, if you're looking at them directly in the eye, if you're, you know, nodding for approval, those kinds of things. Again, effective communication is really just a vital part of any team. So strong listening skills are very, very highly valued and very, very necessary. And you know, just because this is such an important skill, I just want to take a moment to go through this a little bit. You know, some of us might think hearing and listening, they're interchangeable, but there really is a difference between the two. Hearing we think of as more of an involuntary act. So maybe if there's some background noise where you are right now, you're not necessarily listening to it, but you can hear it going on. And it doesn't really take a lot of concentration. While listening, or active listening, really requires some effort. It requires concentration. The brain has to process the information to relate the meaning. When we're actively listening, our minds focus on the information received. We process it accordingly. So we really have to focus on the subject matter of whatever is being spoken about. Then we have to process it, you know, come to really take in what that person is saying, and then, of course, comprehend all the concepts or the information that's being given to us. So, again, think back to a time perhaps when you sat through a continued education course and walked away not retaining any of the information that was presented. And hopefully it's not this one that you're thinking of. But that's an example of hearing rather than actively listening and obtaining that information. So when we are listening during a conversation or a course, we're able to be more effective. We can process information, and we can engage with the subject matter instead of being just passive observers. So active listening, it does take some practice. You know, there are perhaps some dry courses, or there's some information that's not always interesting. So it really does take a conscious effort to actively listen, but it is worth it, especially when it comes to board relations or building a team, you know, to know that when that person is speaking, they are actually being heard and understood. That can go a long way among a board or amongst your members. And in addition to being better listeners, being able to build better communication among your board or volunteers or your members, consider conducting some team building exercises that directly relate to active listening. They directly relate to clear communication or working as a team in order to accomplish a goal. Something like that is as simple as storytelling. This can really be a great exercise for boards to working together, work on their active listening skills. And it's, you know, simple enough, something you can do right before a board meeting. Make sure you plan maybe an extra 10, 15, 20 minutes, depending on how big your board is. You can simply divide into teams, maybe 2 people of that, and that person's going to decide, one person's going to decide, I'm sorry, back up. We're going to divide into teams. Say you have a board of 6. If you divide, obviously, in half, one person's going to decide on a topic for a story. They're going to begin that story by providing just the first sentence. Then going in order, each team member must pick up the story where the member left off. So and maybe in this case, if you have a small group, that everyone starts with 2 or 3 sentences. But that makes it imperative to listen intently and then be able to follow that theme of the story, since you're having to continue the story. This next exercise probably works better with a smaller board. When you partner up with one person, maybe you ask that one person to say, tell a story of their favorite vacation or their favorite childhood memory. The other person then, who isn't explaining the story, is really going to be listening very intently. And then they're going to turn around and repeat it back to the rest of the group and include as many details as possible. So, you know, these are very easy to do. They don't cost anything, but they're really a great exercise. And they might be something you start to incorporate in your board meetings or even in your member meetings regularly, so that you are working on those skills. We're also getting that opportunity to get to know each other on a more personal level. You know, if you're speaking about your favorite vacation or your favorite childhood memory, things like that. So kind of dual purpose there. Also, in order to understand one another better and have a language that you use, maybe interpreted differently, we're going to want to try a team building exercise of what we call blind drawing. It's similar to a storytelling exercise. You divide it into pairs. However, one person is going to receive a picture. They'll take a picture, say the president brings in a bunch of pictures, and you take one of those. The other person will receive a blank piece of paper. The person with the picture cannot show the other one the picture or tell them what it is. Instead, they'll need to communicate directions to the person with the blank paper and have them try to draw the image as they describe it. So we did something like this a few months back here in our office. It wasn't drawing, it was folding a piece of paper. We were back to back. You had a partner, you were back to back. One person was giving instructions to the other person on how to fold the piece of paper. And unfortunately, I have to say, we only had one team within our office that did that correctly. But it really just goes to show you how people interpret things, and the language that we use can be interpreted very differently. And really stresses that we clearly communicate with one another, and we don't all use the same language to describe something or relay information in the same way. So it just really helps us to understand that and hopefully work on that and improve that. Another exercise your board or your members might want to do, and I thought this one was interesting. It's called Stand by Your Quote. I don't know if anybody's done that. This was new to me. But I thought it was a great way to tie in certain subjects among your team building exercises, as well as brushing up on our communication skills. So what you do is select a handful of famous quotes. They could be related to leadership. Ideally, if you were doing that with your board, that's probably what you would want to choose, but they don't necessarily have to be. Again, this could be related to any topic you like. But quotes like, from Albert Einstein here we have, "A person who never made a mistake never tried anything new." Thought that was a good quote. Or this one you see here from Theodore Roosevelt, "Believe you can and you're halfway there." You know, sometimes it's just believing that we can do that, and the other part is executing it. Or one from Maya Angelou, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how that made you feel." Again, these are just some examples of, I thought, some great leadership quotes, but you would collect a bunch of those, make sure you had a variety of them, and then you post these throughout your meeting room. Have your board members take a few moments to read each quote, have them pick one that really resonates with them as a leader or whichever topic you might be discussing or working on. You have each person share their thoughts as to why the quote was meaningful for them and how it relates to their own thoughts on leadership. So again, this gives us an opportunity to learn about different insights and perspectives, and it helps us understand we may not all have a similar leadership style, which I think is important to know about one another, especially as a board. Some of us maybe come from the place where, well, it's been done this way forever, so we're going to keep doing it, while others might want to take a new approach to something. So, you know, when we understand each other better, we often communicate better. And of course, we don't just want to focus on our board relationships. We do want to focus on our relationships among our members as well. So you might even want to consider doing some of these exercises as a whole membership, depending on how large your membership is, of course. And another one you might think about doing was building a timeline. So you would take a bulletin board or some kind of other surface, create just a long blank timeline. That timeline should start as far as back as the oldest member on your team or within your members, which some of us know a little bit farther back than maybe some of us aren't aware of. And you're going to mark each year on that timeline. And you're going to use narrow strips of paper, and you would write down important dates. Probably first you would start with what your chapter, so maybe your first annual meeting. Then if you had a year where you started a scholarship program, you're going to go ahead and pin those to the timeline. Next, you want to give your members a few slips of paper. Ask them to mark down 4 important moments in their life, and then you let them pin that on the timeline. Then give your members some time to read through the timeline. So I thought this was a great way to engage all of your members, if that's how you choose to do it, and find out what's really important to them. But then you also initiated conversations among them, and they're going to be learning about one another as well. So these are just a few ideas for team building. If your board's struggling, if you have a new board, you know, team building is a really great exercise to get over those hurdles and face those challenges head on. And you might want to, you know, try some of these to help facilitate communication, really build respect among one another, and work on those active listening skills. So are there any questions at this time? No? Okay. Well, in addition to these team building exercises that we use to strengthen relationships among each other, it really presents a great opportunity to engage your new members. Some of them might be hesitant to engage with one another, but we also want to be sure we're engaging them on a regular basis, not just within team building exercises, really especially during that first year that is so critical. Or at least until they feel comfortable as a member. You know, you're going to have those members that are more introverted and they're shy, and they do constantly need to be engaged. So how do we do this? How do we network and engage with our new members? Well, we first want to start by knowing who they are. And this can be something as simple as a ribbon or a sticker on their name badge at the meeting that identifies them as a new member. I know a lot of our chapters, they acknowledge our new members in their newsletters. They ask them to stand at chapter meetings. Perhaps they post or tag them in social media. Whatever it is, make it easy for your veteran members to spot the new members so they know who new members are and ensure they can go out of their way to make them feel welcome. Also, consider giving your new members a questionnaire at the start of their membership. Ask what they'd like to get out of their chapter, or ask if they're interested in volunteering. What are they most excited about? When you are asking directly to them, you're sending a message to your new members that says, we care. You know, we care about what your thoughts are. We want to make sure that you're happy as a member. But it really is going to give you a better understanding of how to meet their needs. And if you don't want to do a formal survey, that's fine. Maybe have these questions prepared and ready to ask those when you meet with new members face-to-face. So again, you're both going to be expanding your network when you have these kind of conversation or these icebreakers, conversation starters or icebreakers. You get to know one another, so you're engaging that new member as well as expanding your own network. You might want to consider hosting an event with the senior leaders of your chapter and the new members. Give them an opportunity to network with one another. It'll give them a chance to get to know each other better, but it'll also learn from one another, especially if there's a generational gap there. And it helps new members know who their leaders are and who they can turn to for help. Oftentimes we might know new members, but they might not know us, kind of a thing. So be sure your senior leaders are aware of them and your new members are aware of your senior leaders. You could consider hosting a chapter-wide volunteer event also, like serving a dinner at a local food pantry, working on river cleanup. Our CDMs, I've learned this, are not ones to really shy away from any of these volunteer opportunities. So try to take advantage of this, and that gets everybody involved and engaged. Also consider your pre-professional members. You might want to consider starting a study group, and that might be thought of as something a little bit more unconventional in terms of networking, but it's definitely a great way to engage those members. And typically a veteran or more experienced member will facilitate a group like this, and they'll act as a mentor or a coach for those that are going to sit for the exam. Perhaps consider pairing your new members with veteran members, acting as advisors. This way they always have someone to speak with directly, either about chapter-related issues, professional-related issues, or perhaps anything else in between, just depending on their relationship. But give them a direct line of communication between someone like yourself, as experienced members and volunteers, and them as a new member. That really can go a long way with them, and it can help keep them engaged. And of course, I had to throw it out there, ask them to volunteer. Ask them to help with registration at the annual meeting or stuff badges. Ask them if they'd like to take on a more demanding role. Offer to help them to navigate that role. This will help them to expand, again, their network, but it also is going to benefit your chapter when you have volunteers step up. I know we talk a lot about engagement and networking, but these sort of engagement techniques are a little bit more non-traditional. Oftentimes we refer to social media or maybe career day, those kinds of things, where we're trying to get members engaged or non-members engaged. But these are a little bit different, so I hope that you find them useful. But it's just a great way that we can get to know our new members and they can get to know us. So any questions there? No? Okay. And again, don't forget you can use the web function, the chat function on the web portion if you're logged into that. So I know we all understand that networking and engagement are a part of team building. However, recognition and appreciation are also a building block to strong board and engaged members. We do need to keep that in mind. And as many of you know, we're about 2 weeks away from celebrating our 2nd annual Member Appreciation Week. Similar to last year, we will have a week-long celebration in honor of our members, you. I don't want to spoil anything, but you're going to receive an email that will have a lot more details about that week, and that will come out in a couple of weeks. However, as a chapter, this might be something you might want to consider for your own chapter Member Appreciation Week. You might want to hold a raffle with prizes being something related to your state or something like ANFP merchandise. Maybe ask your members to write a post about what their chapter means to them or how it made an impact. And you can judge those and give out prizes for the best 3. Or even ask members. Oh, I hear some background noise there. If you don't mind muting your phone, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Ask members to share their favorite photo of a chapter event. Really the point of appreciation is it doesn't have to be monumental and over the top, but it's that members know they are appreciated. You could consider, again, hosting a special event like a member appreciation breakfast or a reception. Try something out of the ordinary like a family picnic with games and kid-friendly activities, or even a wine and cheese pairing. I know we've had a couple of chapters that have done that, and that's been very successful. And ask some of your local sponsors, ask if they'll help with donations or other contributions. So the cost won't solely fall on members. which then doesn't really, not really a typical member appreciation event if we're asking them to pay for that. Consider a gift, something like a cookbook with your members' favorite recipes, or another small token of appreciation like a small photo frame, or I know sometimes at our local Target we have a dollar aisle and you can find little herb seed pods, something small like that. Again, it doesn't have to be monumental. Just showing your appreciation can really go a long way, and it reminds members or volunteers that they're thought of. And if you don't have a Volunteer of the Year award in place, consider starting one. I think this is a great way to motivate volunteers. It's a great way to entice our members to become involved as volunteers as well. Something else that I think might be kind of fun, but would get your members engaged as well as recognize them, is try some silly or goofy awards. Giving out awards like the member that's most likely to be a first to arrive at a meeting, or maybe late in some cases. I think we all know one member like one or the other. Or a volunteer that's most likely to never quit volunteering. I know we have some volunteers out there that have just been doing it for so many years, and we gratefully, appreciate that. But stuff like that, make it fun for them. And again, consider some small tokens. Maybe they're more frequent ways of appreciation and recognition throughout the year. Certainly handwritten thank you notes. Recognition on your chapter social media account or chapter newsletters are always wonderful as well. And the same goes for our volunteers. Our volunteers should be thanked frequently and consistently throughout the year. They're really our boots on the ground. They ensure our speakers are confirmed for chapter meetings, the registration fees are collected, our social media is kept up to date, the chapter remains in good financial health, among many other things, because of our volunteers. They deserve to know they are appreciated, and they should be recognized for their efforts. And since I should practice what I preach, something that I can really, truly never say enough to all of you that are on the phone, that are not able to join us today. Some of you I get to meet face-to-face. Some of you I only talk through the phone. Thank you, really from the bottom of my heart, and certainly I know from all the staff here at ANFP. Your efforts and the dedication, they don't go unnoticed, and we really, truly appreciate everything you do for your chapter as well as for ANFP. So just so you are aware of that, and again, I hope your members and your volunteers are aware of that as well. All right, well, I'm going to pause here. Any questions about anything that we've covered here today? No questions? All right, well, if you do think of something later, certainly feel free to reach out to me again. I do apologize that our phone system is still down. We should have that back up and running shortly. In the meantime, feel free to email me with any questions that you might have. And just lastly, a few important dates. Again, rebate requirements and the documents pertaining to those are past due. We will no longer accept any more submissions after next Friday the 31st. So anybody that doesn't have that, please get that in as soon as possible. Of course, the 2017 Annual Conference and Expo grant applications, those are due April 13th, so just a few weeks away. If you plan on applying for any of the chapter awards, communications, government affairs, membership of the Diamond Award, those are due next Friday as well, so be sure to get those in as soon as possible. Anybody that still wishes to register for New Jersey, today is the day to do it because the early bird registration does end tomorrow. And of course, we hope to see everybody out in Las Vegas for ACE, June 6th through 9th. Well, thank you all for joining the call today. Please mark your calendars for April 25th. We'll hold our second town hall meeting. And so this is, I don't know if anybody here attended this, but it's more of an open format somewhat. If you start thinking of your questions now related to chapters and you'd like to have those answered, please go ahead and email me those by Tuesday, April 18th, so I can prepare those for the 25th. Again, thank you all for joining us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.